Hello, this is Tom Cahill. It's Tuesday, the 20th of August 2024. There's a few little things, well, there's quite a lot of things happening at the minute, all at the same time. So, if I deal with one of them, or one cluster, let's say one cluster, they're all linked to each other, but one cluster of things. It seems quite obvious that the cluster bomb of demoralisation tactics against the British public that's happened in literally the last 3 or 4 days, all these things are getting released at the same time. It's very obvious. Like, there's this published document, it's kind of like a pictogram showing what will happen if you take your children out of school. You'll have to pay these humongous fines. Now, most people, if they had the chance, would take the children out of schools at this point. I know a lot of people are very negligent parents and they like the idea of sending them to school because it's just babysitting. But you see, they wouldn't have that attitude if they had the money to be able to look after them themselves. You see, that wouldn't be an issue. You see, it's probably also linked to the tax break that they're trying to remove on private schools, making private schools have to pay tax like as though they're a business, whereas they shouldn't have to pay tax, should they? Because if they're providing a service completely for free, which is then taking, say, whatever it is, 5% off the overall school education budget, then they definitely should not have to ever pay tax. It's absolutely outrageous. They should. So there's that. But this thing about mixing, and they're constantly putting things up about drag queen story hour and stuff. So, and at the Olympics was a lot of stuff to do with children, inappropriate activity with children, obviously all inspired by the OTO. They're desperate to get paedophilia legalised, and as that can't happen in a normal way, they had to go right around the houses. So what they've done is they've literally made schools paedophile institutions. So what's going to happen to all the children who stay in school, I don't know. But you see, the things that they teach people on the national curriculum, people think that it's allowed because it's in the national curriculum, but that's all based on the teachings of Kinsey, when you know, not directly but indirectly, because that's like a law of science, like gravity. So you can't talk about physics and say, no, gravity's rubbish, yeah, because it won't be accepted, even though nobody really knows what gravity is. It's the same with that. So the Kinsey Institute, though, unlike gravity, which you can probably prove no one really knows how it works, not that you know how it works, but that they don't know how it works. It's the same with the Kinsey Institute, only the Kinsey Institute has got like a total ban on anyone looking at any of their research, whereas physicists and stuff publish papers, you can read them, but the Kinsey Institute, everything's under lock and key. And I think it was funded mainly by the American government, but either way, so they're allowing that. So that's clearly like an institutional thing. So everything in social work and in education and in medicine, where it crosses over to this, paedophilia doesn't need to be legalised, because they've already started bringing things in to make sure, like, shift the goalposts. So things that would have been considered totally inappropriate to teach children and talk about children and indoctrinate them with would all be seen as severe grooming, which could get you killed, and the police wouldn't do anything about it because, well, you caught them doing it. So yeah, because remember, in some states in America, if you catch doing something to a child which is completely inappropriate, you're allowed to kill them on the spot. You don't have to report them to the police. Yeah, so just think about it. In a common law country, often they'll come out with a law that kind of reaffirms something which has always been your legal right. Say, for instance, the 2002 Proceeds of Crime Act made tipping off specifically illegal, a crime, yeah? So tipping off has always been illegal. If I work for a company and the police come along and say, we've been told by whoever that company's stealing money, and I go and tell all my colleagues that I've been in at the police station and they've told me, and then they delete all the information or get their stories straight or invent a new company to transfer all the assets over and say, oh, it's not our fault anymore, it's with that company now, that's in another country. Yeah, that's always been illegal. That would always be conspiracy, clearly. But you see, what they do is they reaffirm things. Now, with the schools just being paedophile indoctrination centres, with these ludicrously high grades that never existed when I was at school, but they all get all these high grades now. But you couldn't get those grades because they didn't even exist then. Yeah, they have like a AAA star in this and a double this and a double award and a triple award and all this. That never used to exist. You did get double awards for certain things, and you got a triple award or double award for science, because it could be biology, chemistry and physics, or it could just be a double award, which would be sort of like, you know, because in some schools, like comprehensive schools, they often didn't offer you the chance to do chemistry, physics and biology. So they'd say, oh, we can have a double award then. But you see, that's not really fair, because then in the, say, the grammar school, where they all teach them completely for the test, so they don't really know what they're doing, but they know how to pass the test, which they don't do so much in comprehensive schools, they get like extra points, so they can get more, you know, for A levels and things like this, and then they can get onto higher research, higher programs. But it's because they've sort of cheated them into it. But anyway, that's aside the point. Making people think all their children are geniuses is just playing into the narcissism, the increasing narcissism. It's a bit like the house prices. How, if you've got a house and you've got children living in a great big bedroom, and then you're putting them into a job, you're behind them going into a job where they couldn't even buy a room half as big as the little box room that they're going to get if they move out, and you think that's good. What's happened is this elevation of duncery, perversion, ridiculous, fantastical house prices which bear no relation to reality. Just like SpaceX does not exist. They are not going to the Mars, they're not going to the moon, but people have put money into the stock market, so they all want to believe that SpaceX is real, because if SpaceX isn't real, people, well, the economy would definitely, the stock market will be seen as a fantasy. People will say it will collapse. No, it won't collapse, because it's a fantasy, so it only collapses when people want it to collapse. But people talk about market forces, but market forces don't exist, because the economy is a complete myth, because that's underlined by the insurance system, which does exist, but the actual money that you and I can get hold of, or indirectly via high street banks, is all investments such as pensions and ISAs and things like that. That's all reliant on stocks and shares, the most famous of which we can easily prove in about 10 minutes of thinking about it cannot possibly be real. So the whole thing is a major fantasy. There's another aspect to this, is that China is being touted as a superpower. Well, I don't know what it's like in other countries, I presume it's the same. But since the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, or the virtual closing of it, because of these pretend Houthi rebels who've got all these Exocet type missiles that can just blow anything up for anywhere, yet they just tow them around with camels. Right, if anyone believes that stupid story, I mean, again, it's like a lot of people will believe this stupid story. The closing of the Strait of Hormuz has been known about for a long time. It's to make everything cost massively more, just like pretending that you need to use electricity rather than petrol and coal, even though you need petrol and coal to make electricity, because renewable electricity is coal and oil and gas, because they keep getting produced and you can't run out of them. Whereas spending more on the coal and the oil and the gas to make a very small amount of electricity at a very, very, very high price has absolutely no possible benefit to anybody. It can't possibly be justified, because even if you believe that CO2 is a problem, it will obviously use a lot more CO2 to create it. So the whole thing is just based on a humongous fantasy. And I think the issue with China and the massive subsidisation of China, so for instance you can buy some toenail clippers for like 50 pence in England from China. How much would it cost you to send those toenail clippers to China? China has been massively subsidised. They also get a lot of charity money, like Israel. They're a welfare state, and now they're admitting that their economy is completely and utterly fucked. But people keep thinking they're a superpower, because they believe that things like the Belt and Road Initiative, right? They say, well, Chinese move in, and they bribe the politicians to let them have one thing to give them another thing. Like in Malaysia, they'll agree to build a building, they'll bribe the people wanting to build the building into sort of fucking the project up. Well, Malaysians always fuck every project up anyway, that's a fact. So what happens is, then they'll buy up shares in the business so that the business isn't really viable. And by the time project's actually finished, the people who allegedly owned the project and commissioned it actually own the Chinese government money, yeah? But they're allowed to pretend to own the building still, but they don't. So they owe them money, and most of the money coming into the business just goes straight out to some Chinese company, you see. But the issue with that is that appears to be a legitimate thing, only it's not, because all the money that the Chinese government gets is borrowed of Western countries, right? And all these Western countries are financed by banks, and all the banks are financed by the Bank of England. So when people say all these Chinese are taking over everything, in the way that they assume ownership of these things when people default because they bribed them into messing the project up, all of that actually, just in the exact same way, is all actually owned by the Bank of England. So they don't actually own anything. So when people say, well, at some stage they'll own all of Africa, well, no, they won't own all of Africa, because all that money's borrowed, and they always default on everything. They're absolutely useless at balancing the books. They're useless at doing anything because they just steal all the money, and then it will all still belong to the Bank of England. So it's like a bluff within a bluff within a bluff. Anyway, so anybody who says that they're a problem, the only reason they're a problem is because the Bank of England wants them to be a problem, and we're paying to finance them being a problem against us. China's just like a sock puppet, or a glove around a hand. But there's another glove on top of it. There's another glove on top of it, which is all these third world countries that they're stealing all the minerals from. But remember, all the stuff that they steal the minerals from doesn't really get used in China. It gets used in the production of things that are then sold back to us, the Western countries. So China doesn't really get anything ever. Just some corrupt politicians get nice cars, and apartments will probably fall down in 10 years. That's all they get. Okay, so the day is Tuesday, the 20th of August 2024. Let me know your thoughts.